Oh boy, how the mighty have fallen. On this episode of Rotten Reviews, I'm taking a look at the 2015 film Taken 3. It is the third film in the Taken franchise. I don't know why it had to be a franchise, but it's the third. Hopefully there won't be more. It has a 13% on the tomato meter and a 44% on the audience score. 68,000 plus user reviews, so I'm going to say they're probably accurate. I have to agree. It is completely rotten. In fact, I'm closer to agreeing with the critics that there's very little redeemable film here. You don't get action. You get action that's kind of disjointed and unbelievable. You get a Liam Neeson playing an action hero that it's quite obvious he's incapable of doing so, and they use a lot of camera tricks and edits to even make him look like he can climb a fence and run. It is pretty sad, and he shouldn't be doing these types of films if he can't actually put in even half-assed decent action. I don't know what it is. He's not a big fat guy. Maybe he's just got physical problems, arthritis. I don't know. But obviously, they had to use a lot of editing to make him even half-ass action worthy. And it shows. And this film is just, it's not to be taken seriously. It's got a plot that it could have worked. The plot itself could have worked, but everything is disjointed and disconnected, and there's no sense of scale or travel distance, and it's unbelievable. And you have periods of time that pass with people traveling distances that aren't realistic, and you have Liam Neeson escaping from what are definitely certain death scenarios where he should have been blown up or burned alive, and yet suddenly he's just back, and the movie never explains how he escaped from these scenarios, and it's so in your face and just blatant about it. It's like the director just didn't give a shit. He was like, yeah, I know it doesn't look good and it's not believable, but fuck it, you already bought your ticket, so I got your ass for this 93-minute ride. You paid already, suckers. That's what it feels like very much. Let's just run down the cast. You have Liam Neeson playing his same old character that he's played in all the movies. You have Maggie Grace playing his daughter. You have Forrest Whitaker playing another one of his incompetent police officer roles. He's played an incompetent police detective so many times in so many movies. Sometimes he's bad, sometimes he's good. I mean, sometimes he's the villain and sometimes he's not, but he's always incompetent and he's always bored me as a cop. And I don't know why he keeps doing this. Maybe Forrest Whitaker's just typecast as a generic detective now. I don't know. His big, characterization in this film is that he's got a rubber band around his wrist and he just plays with it and stretches it and snaps with it all throughout the movie. It's very similar to how other people play detectives, where they just stick a toothpick in their mouth and they're always like putting this toothpick in their mouth, and that's supposed to make them a character. Well, Forrest Whitaker, he makes himself a character by just putting a rubber band on his wrist and playing with it throughout the whole film. That's all there is to it. Big, exciting police detective there. Pretty pathetic. I will give him credit. At least he didn't stick a toothpick in his mouth at the same time. So there's that, I guess. And Famke Janssen is back to play the wife of the title character of the hero. But she is dispatched and killed off really quick. So she only has a few minutes at the beginning, a few dull, long minutes at the beginning of this film, and she dies off at the beginning, and that's what moves the plot forward. She is killed off mysteriously, and that's the big crime that our hero has to solve, and it gets ever more complicated. It kind of twists and double twists, and it is supposed to have like a triple twist in the plot, but it doesn't even feel like there's one twist in it because nothing hooks up. Nothing suspenseful. You're not believing that any of this is going to affect anybody at all. Of course, the daughter's going to survive without a scratch. Of course, Liam Neeson is going to survive without a scratch. And he does at all times. He can just walk away from complete fiery explosions, and even his clothes aren't ruffled or anything. And he's just superhuman. And let's get right into the audience reviews. I'm just going to entertain 3-star and below reviews. Anything above that, I'm sorry, it's just trolling and I won't put up with it here. So here's a 3-star review from December 3rd, 2019, making it about 5 weeks ago. Worst out of the three, I see why they stopped. An okay movie. It's not even okay. It's completely rotten. Number of stars on a 5-star system. I give this half a star because it got boring too. It got boring when it didn't need to. It was not only full of all the flaws I've already listed, but it also became boring. There was a part of this movie that, for some reason, it needed to spend a lot of time inside the daughter's college classroom, and I don't know why. We were just sitting around in there doing a whole lot of nothing, watching students run around from a fire drill and watching the police slowly chase Liam Neeson through the crowds of students in the hallways, and a whole lot of talking going on in there. And there was a restroom scene in there with a whole lot of talking, and it was all in this I don't know if it's a university or where it is. I'm not really up on my Southern California university system. Could have been just a generic community college for all I know. But in any case, we were inside of this place for a long time. There was a whole lot of nothing going on in there. Boy, oh boy, half a star at the most because a movie was made and people got paid. Okay, no, it wasn't okay, not whatsoever. 1 star, October 23rd, 2019. Predictable, boring, lame. Please put this franchise down. Yeah, I don't even think it should have become a franchise. The first one was unique. It was interesting. It worked well. Again, it wasn't the greatest action movie in the world. It just had an interesting take that we hadn't seen in a long time. More of a suspense, mystery too. Just being an action hero franchise, please just put it down. If there's another one of these, God help us all, is all I can say. 1 star, September 24th, 2019. One was enough, three are too many. Yeah, exactly what I was saying. 1 star, not English. 3 stars, August 18. A step below the previous two movies. The plot is beyond ridiculous at this point. Disappointing, but still a passable action thriller. No, it's not. You know, I have quite a list. I made quite a list. It starts off very slow. This thing starts, I know what it is. I've seen the other two movies, right? I'm expecting a thriller, an action movie. Even if it's bad, I'm expecting action, right? Unfortunately, I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and this was a couple of days ago, and the first time I've seen it. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, is this going to be like just a melodrama, like an ex-wife melodrama thing? Because we spent a lot of time just Liam Neeson talking to his, I guess his name is Brian. Brian's talking to his wife, Famke Janssen, about a whole lot of nothing. And then he visits the wife. Then he drives across town and talks to the daughter and talks to her about a whole lot of nothing. And the big surprise there is that his daughter's pregnant and she's not married, and I guess it's an illegitimate child with her boyfriend or whatnot, and maybe she'll have to drop out of school, and she's all distraught over it, and will she be able to tell her dad, and oh my gosh, what if her dad just doesn't accept it, and etc. And we get a whole lot of that. And then he drives back over and visits the wife again, so we get more of that. And it's like bouncing back and forth between a whole lot of family melodrama and the ex-wife. The ex-wife's husband that we've seen in previous films, he's just straight up made into the super bad villain in this one. Surprise, surprise. And before he becomes the villain, we have to get melodrama with him telling Neeson not to see his wife. He doesn't like them having conversations together in private. It's inappropriate, and he's threatened by it, and etc. So this goes on for a while, and I'm sitting there going, wow, do I have to fast forward this to get to some action? I don't want to, because I have to sit through this thing for a rotten review. Boy, oh boy. Let's move on. 1.5 stars, July 21. The action sequence are confusing to watch. The shaky cam and cut takes. Yeah, the shaky cam's not as bad as the Bourne Supremacy or anything like that, or Jason Bourne, but it's trying. It's really trying to be that type of film. And worse than the shaky cam is just a whole lot of editing to make Liam Neeson look like he's an action hero, that he can still duke it out with the bad guys, and everything's just done with camera tricks, including him jumping over fences and running from the cops. He can't really do any of these things, so it's all just literally like it's been made into memes online, about 47 takes. Yeah, There's a sequence where he runs from the cops and jumps over a chain link fence, and an action hero, you should be able to do this all in one take, really. But even if you had 4 or 5 takes, okay. But no, it's got 47. Yeah, it's got 47. Just because for some reason he just can't do these types of things. He can't even half-ass do these things, or it wouldn't, or it could have been done in a dozen takes. Nope, it took 47 takes. There's memes online about it. Put it into Google or YouTube. You'll call it right up. Let's see, 1 star, June 17, An Editing Nightmare. Oliver Megaton's action thriller Taken 3, 2015, is a complete bore with a cliche story and atrocious editing. There is hardly any action until the last half hour, with a few cool shootouts and one neat plane and car stunt. That's it. So if you think you're thinking about watching Taken 3 as a fan of the first two for some excitement and laughs, there is nothing fun here. Skip Taken 3 and just watch Taken again or another action franchise. Do not waste your time. Yeah, the director's got kind of a weird name, Oliver Megaton. I noticed that too in the credits, and I don't know what other stuff he's directed, but maybe he should stick to some other line of work. Oliver Megaton, despite that catchy name, I'm sorry, he's just, there's not a whole lot of weight to him there. Let's take a look at my list. Yeah, the character from the previous films we know as Brian. Yeah, he's a lot dumber in this. Before, he was more reserved, well thought out. He had a plan. Yeah, he had a quiet, simmering rage inside of him, but he had a plan. In this one, it's more like he's taken out of, he's worse than Harrison Ford's character in The Fugitive. It's like kind of got a fugitive story going on. He's framed for the death of his wife. But everything he does is atrociously not thought out. It's impulsive. It's reckless. It's the exact opposite stuff of what he would have done in the first movie. It's like they reduced him to a very stupid character. Um, in the first movie, he had a plan. He knew when to do things and when not to do things. And this one, he straight up just attacks the cops. Like when the cops come into his ex-wife's apartment and they find him like basically leaning over her dead body, he says, well, I didn't do this, but he doesn't cooperate with them. They just simply tell him to, basically put his hands behind his back, to get on his knees so they can arrest him. Is that hard to do, really? That's what he should have done, because obviously he's not his wife's killer. There's a reason why they investigate these things. But instead, when the 2 or 3 cops are trying to arrest him, he outright attacks the cops, beats them with their own pistols, goes on a foot chase, shoots it out with them. I mean, what? That's the best way to convince them that you're guilty and to kill you in the process of all this. But yeah, it's like they reduced his character to a complete moron, just to make this contrived fugitive action sequence, a ripped off scene out of The Fugitive happen. And yeah, right away I'm thinking this is not the right character. It's very stupid. Further on my list, yeah, he gets away from the cops. There's this very boring chase where, the cops are chasing him on the freeway, and it's very boring. And the camera work is so choppy, you can barely see what's going on. You literally cannot tell what's going on. It should be easy to figure out. He's got control of a police car. He's taken a hostage in a police car, and he's trying to escape from the cops, and they're on the freeway. This is pretty easy to follow. This is pretty easy to follow in all the other films that we've seen this a million times before as well. But in this director has attempted this Megaton. He's chopped this up and made it so choppy in the editing, showing all this, but that I struggled to figure out what was going on. I mean, I'm in a 10-minute chase sequence and I can't figure out who's driving what and what the cars are doing, and they're spinning around and flipping around and trucks are flipping around. And I'm like, what is going on? I couldn't hardly tell what was happening. It was almost so bad I wanted to rewind it to see if I missed anything. That's how bad this was edited. It's a complete fail. This Megaton character, he's a whole megaton of fail is what he is. It's really bad. And unfortunately, it's not one of those films that's laugh out loud funny, where, it sounds like it's so bad I could laugh at it. No, it's not. It's just so confusing, disjointed, and boring. And there's a part at which, during this epic. I guess it's supposed to be some kind of epic police chase, but it's not. Brian leads them up into a parking garage, and he goes to the roof of the parking garage, and then he reverses his police car at a high speed into an elevator shaft and crashes the car down this multi-story, it looks like 6 or 7 stories, that he falls down inside the police car in an elevator shaft. And then there's a massive explosion as the police car explodes, like with the explosive visuals of like 5 or 6 police cars, right? The movies make this so epic and these explosions that it can't possibly be one police car exploding like this. But even if it were, the explosion, this massive fireball engulfs the entire elevator shaft in the parking garage. And then it just cuts to Liam Neeson walking away. Really? How did that happen? You're in a police car. You're belted into a police car in the driver's seat. You reverse it into an elevator shaft. You fall down the elevator shaft inside that police car. The police car hits the bottom, bursts into a gigantic, tower of flames. And then the camera just cuts to another scene a minute later. You're just walking away and you don't even have a scratch. And you're calling up somebody on your cell phone. That's what this movie does. It does this 2 or 3 different times at a different part. I don't even know how I'm going to explain this. Okay, we're inside a classroom. Liam Neeson's inside a university or a community college or whatever it is. His daughter's in there. The police are in there. Liam Neeson has to escape the police. He runs out of this school in this crowd of students during a fire alarm going off. Okay. And then we're in a scene in which Forest Whitaker's character is with the daughter, and they're alone in a classroom. And Forest Whitaker is telling the daughter, I know you love your dad and all this, but you've got to give him up. Just give him up so we can arrest him and investigate the death of your mom and all this. It's the standard stuff we've seen a million times before. It goes on for far too long, and it's very boring, and that's another problem. Now, here's the interesting part. We're in this room with them talking, and then all of a sudden, it just cuts to like the hills outside of Los Angeles somewhere. We're on the edge of the desert, and we're watching some Escalade, some big black SUVs of some type go up on these winding roads up into the mountains, leaving Los Angeles, I presume. And all of a sudden it shows us Liam Neeson inside just a generic passenger car of some type. No explanation whose car it is or where he got it. And he's just in between these SUVs, tailing them up into the mountains. Okay. He was just at the school before. Now he's all of a sudden maybe 100 miles away up in the mountains, tailing these bad guys. Okay, that's pretty jarring and unexplained, but then it gets really bad. He has a chase scene with one of these Escalades or one of these big giant black SUVs. The bad guys figure out he's tailing them. They kind of run him off the road. They crash him right off this ravine. Like they push him in his car off of the edge of this gigantic cliff down into this ravine. And then his car flips end over end over end over end for quite a while down into this ravine, and then crashes ultimately at the bottom, bursts into flames. And then it has 3 separate explosions that go off. Not one where the gas tank blew up. One explosion followed by a second explosion followed by a third explosion that all come from different parts of the same damn passenger car that's upside down and crushed. The roof's all crushed in. He couldn't even have survived the crash, much less these explosions. Then it just cuts away. Well, first, okay, the bad guys are there in their SUV, and they look down at this burning wreck, and the one bad guy looks to the other, and he says, let's just go get drunk. And then they drive away down the road. And then it cuts to a little bit further down the road. There's a turn in the road 100 yards down somewhere. And wow, Brian, Liam Neeson's character, he just runs out on the road without a scratch, with a gun in his hand, points it at a driver passing on the road, orders him to stop and that he needs a ride. And then the passenger of this vehicle says, okay, sure, man, and just scoots over, and he drives off with this guy's vehicle. What? we were at the school, and then we're in this ravine, and then we're watching Liam Neeson get killed, and then he's just there hijacking another car. And all of this has happened it's all just happened as I described, with no explanation of what the fuck is going on. And then later you find out these people that he's been tailing up into the mountains are henchmen of his ex-wife's husband, who's the villain. What? I'm just like shaking my head, and I laughed out loud at this because it was so ridiculous and disjointed and unexplained. And again, Brian, the character of Brian, has escaped from death with no explanation. Okay, I guess this is the movie we're talking about here. This is Taken 3, and this wonderful Taken franchise. Let's move on to some more audience reviews. Half a star. Probably one of the worst movies I have ever seen in theaters. I was laughing uncontrollably less than 20 minutes in. Left very early to see something else. Yeah, I wish I had been laughing uncontrollably. It was just too stupid, but if it had been one of those films, man, that would be epic. Crack open a couple of beers and laugh your ass off, but it's not. It's not one of those. 1 star, April 20. Taken was a good action movie. Taken 2 was okay. This film just shouldn't have been made. I don't even think Taken 2 should have been made personally, but yeah, Taken 2 was bearable. This one, yeah, it's a straight up cash grab. I'm just going to call it a cash grab. The director got your money, and by the time you realized what you were left with, didn't matter. You already paid, suckers. So, March 16, 2019, 1.5 stars. I can handle the 47 cuts and the shaky cam, poorly trying to hide the fact that Liam Neeson can't run. I can handle the inevitability of more money means more explosions in franchises like these. I can even contort myself to handle the right out of the gate fridging of one of my favorite actresses that Taken 3 copped so much flack for. Yeah, killing off Famke Janssen's character right away. But what I cannot handle is how absolutely fucking dumb this movie gets in the second half. Every 5 minutes, my roommate or I had to scream, "What?" at the things. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You're just, what the fuck? That's what I was saying while I actually rewound some of it to make sure I was not mistaken on what I had just seen. Let's check my list, shall we? Yeah, I talked about the fact that we went straight from a school somewhere, some university in LA to the mountains, and all that other nonsense happened with no explanation. Yeah, there's this character, this Russian, Spetsnaz. He's ex-Russian Spetsnaz, and he's the henchman hired by the villain of the movie. And he has said more than one time he used to be he was one of the Russian Spetsnaz sent into Afghanistan when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. The only problem with that is he's obviously like 30 something. What was he, like 8 years old when he was sent into Afghanistan by the Russians? Apparently, the director doesn't know much about modern history because the Russians invaded Afghanistan when I was a kid, and I'm almost 50 now. Um, how old was this Spetsnaz character? He was ridiculous on its own and stupid, but it's just a plot fail, like saying that he's some Russian hero of Afghanistan. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. What else do I have on my plot list? Yeah, there's a part where it's in a convenience store for the sake of product placement. A lot of these movies I found, they have to have a scene in a convenience store that goes on for a while just so they can put at least 40 to 50 different products in there that they can pay for the movie. And this one does that. And you're inside like a convenience store and you get lots of product placement. And then you get the best part of it all, where Liam Neeson actually puts a gun in a character's mouth and pulls the trigger. And so you know what's going to happen when you stick like a large caliber pistol in somebody's mouth and pull the trigger. Well, it's a PG-13 movie, so you know what happened? The gun went off, and then the henchman fell backwards on the floor, and then it actually has a close-up to him on the floor, and there's not a drop of blood coming out of his head or out of his mouth or anywhere. He's just a clean body laying there with his eyes open. Yeah, that's believable, and that's Number one, that's a problem of making a movie like this PG-13. And number two, that's a problem of making any kind of action movie PG-13. And number three, that's just a problem where you just don't put stuff like that in the movie if it's PG-13. So what is this megaton director? He's a megaton of shit, in my opinion. Really, he is. What else is on the plot? Yes. Yeah, we've got the cliched thing from action movies where, you know, the bad guy at the end when he's having the showdown with the good guy? You know why he gets killed? Because he has to talk too much. He can't just kill the bad guy when he has more than one opportunity. You know, the good guy will be laying there beaten, defeated, laying on his stomach or his side, you know, unable to respond. The bad guy's got the weapon, it's loaded, he's got it pointed right at the good guy, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't decide to shoot him because he's too busy talking tough or explaining things, and then thereby giving the good guy the time to fight back and get out of his situation. And this movie has a whole lot of that going on. Whole lot of that. Yeah, at the very end, the most ridiculous thing I found in the plot that's a fail for me is the police let him go. At the end of this movie, the police just let Brian go after he's committed so many crimes that he should be locked away for a lot of years. Not only did he, I mean, resisting arrest, assaulting the police, attempted murder of police officers, destruction of police and public property to the tune of millions of dollars, destruction of private property to the tune of millions of dollars, multiple assaults, weapons violations. I mean, you name it. He's done it all to clear his name that he didn't kill his wife. But the police just let him go, smile, and let him walk away because he's the good guy and he didn't murder his wife. And that's, again, part of Forrest Whitaker's really dumb detective character, just like patting him on the back and congratulating him, and he's such a hero. Really? He did all this destruction around Los Angeles, but he's such a hero and he gets to just walk away. Okay. That's one of these type of films. Let's get to some more audience reviews because I've said just about everything I need to off my list. 2 stars. The first one is a classic. This should not even exist. The mom is killed. The ex-husband is another actor. Terrible film. Yeah, the ex-husband has to become the villain because there was nothing left to do, right? But to make that happen. Half a star, December 11, 2018. We're back over a year now. A movie that ignores all what past installments were about, and instead of ending with the first one, 2 more were made afterwards. This one contains a hackneyed, lazy, stereotypical, nonsensical plotline that goes nowhere. Seems Liam Neeson has had enough with this series. It shows in his boredom expression as well as having obvious stunt doubles stand in where his physical limitations couldn't do what's seen on screen. Some characters didn't need to belong since they made no impact. Yeah, a whole lot of nonsense in here just to make the running time longer. You saw, it also had the other flaw where you saw people moving around between point A and B and it didn't add anything to the story. It could have been cut out, but just needed to be 93 minutes and that was the way to do it. 1.5 stars, November 8, 2018, weakest of the trilogy, complete with the story being very bland and uninteresting. 2.5 stars, November 5, 2018, Liam Neeson certainly looks very convincing as a tough, hard as nails kind of guy. That face, that gruff, angry manner, but it's pretty clear now in Taken 3 that Neeson, in his early 60s, isn't really a great action hero anymore. The fight scenes are all done in great close-up with lots of cuts, trying to hide the fact that Neeson can't move like he needs to. When his character is running from the police early in the film, we see 1 second of him running, then cut, then a shot of him from the waist up, then a longer shot. Yeah, there's 47 cuts of him just to escape from the cops in one scene. 1 star. This is not a good sequel. It makes little to no sense. The action is very poor, and the final camera shot was taken right out of the last one. That is no joke. 1.5 stars, October 14, 2018. Horrible movie. The cinematography is god awful. The story and plot is unoriginal. The editing is terrible. Easily the worst of the Taken trilogy. A very disappointing end to the Taken trilogy. One of the worst trilogy finales ever. Forrest Whitaker looked bored throughout the whole movie. The camera work was annoyingly shaky. There was a lot of choppy editing. I also hated how they killed off Brian's ex-wife. Her death was very poorly executed. It felt rushed. This movie was also very boring. Yeah, let me just say one final thing on the death of his wife. You never even saw what killed her until much later when she was like in the morgue and she had like some kind of scar on her throat. Now, keep in mind, she didn't have like a cut on her throat. She had a scar. This is again a failure of a PG-13 film. When Brian discovers his wife is dead, you never even find out what killed her. She's just laying on her side, a little bit in a fetal position on a sofa or a bed. And then later you see her in the morgue and she's got some kind of scar on her neck. That's a PG-13 movie trying to explain how she got killed. I guess the bad guys cut her throat, but there wasn't one drop of blood around her on her bed or sofa that she was laying on or on her, and her throat wasn't slashed anywhere. And then later we see it with a scar. Really? You couldn't even put a fake cut on there? You had to put a scar? Like, how did she scar up when she was dead? Again, it's just this director is trying to put R-rated stuff in a PG-13 movie and does a piss poor job of that. Why not just not have this stuff done this way in the film? This director is straight up incompetent. And that would be, let's take a look just to make sure I've got his name right, Oliver Megaton. Oliver Megaton. Remember that out there, everybody. Oliver Megaton is an incompetent director. Do not let him do your PG-13 action movies. Let him find a true calling, like maybe he can write poetry or something else, because this is not what he should be doing. He's underutilizing his real skills, whatever those skills might be. I'm going to call this as the work of a director that doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And I'll say if that audience score went down to 13% like the tomato meter, I would consider it fair. It was a struggle to get through this thing, and it wasn't even bad enough that I could laugh at it, unfortunately. So I am going to hope that we don't see I hope we don't see another one of these ever again, and I'm going to see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.